Hello all, it is RBB. Today I want to talk about how to customize the brush tool. We've talked about the brush basically before and how to use the tool, but I want to talk about sort of 3 different levels of customizing the brush, 2 of which we're going to cover in this video and the 3rd in another video. So what we're going to cover today is how we can customize brushes, existing brushes, and how we can use and adjust brushes that already exist. And then the next video is going to be how to make our own custom brushes from scratch, which is super fun. Okay, if I try to do it all in one day, we'd be here all day. So we're just going to do these 2 chunks first. All right, so we know our brush tools over here on the left-hand side, and we have looked in the past at how we can pick our brushes with this drop-down little menu right here. And just scroll to the very top to our normal standard brushes. Get up there, bugger. There we go. So we have hard round, soft round, all kinds of different, just plain old brushes. And if you recall, this circle is the profile of the brush. So if I were to click, my brush would completely fill with that color. So that profile filled with that color. And I have my flow turned down a little bit there. So here we go. Boop. There we go. All right, when we know that we can make our brush bigger or smaller, so just this plain round brush, we can make some customization. We can, of course, change the size by toggling this guy down and change the size. Now we've got a larger brush. On the fly, don't forget that you can change that with the open and close brackets, so you don't have to keep going back up to change it. Okay, make it bigger and smaller, so that's great. And if I left click and drag, I will draw a line with this profile. Okay. When we toggle that open, we also can change the hardness of our brush, which is how much of that profile is going to be filled all with 100% opacity. So you can see, boop, right there, it's wall to wall, filled in all the way. If I soften this brush even part way, okay, and I click on it, okay, that brush appears softer. It's the same size brush, it just is fading out at the edges. And if I make this brush 0% hardness, remember this is the same size brush, it appears much smaller, but it's opaque in the middle and fading out before it gets to that 80 pixel size. Okay, so we have those choices we can make. We can also change the orientation of our brush. Right now it's oriented up and down, and it's intended to be used left to right. Now it's a circle, so that doesn't make much difference. If we rotate this around or move it, it doesn't matter. It's a circle. It's going to be exactly the same. Okay, and we can change the opacity, so we can make our brush less opaque, semi-transparent. Okay, we can change the flow, the smoothing, and some things we've talked about before. And we can use pressure sensitivity by clicking on that little waffle arrow looking guy there. And that allows me to, if I switch over to a pressure sensitive stylus, that's going to allow me to change the size of the brush with how hard I'm pushing down on my stylus. But if you're using a mouse, we don't have that option. You can't click lightly. Lots of choices, and of course we can always change the color of our brush. Boop, boop. Okay, put that back to 100%. So we can adjust brushes, even a plain, boring, old round brush like this. We can customize it and do some cool things and try and make it look a little more like what we want. We also have blending modes. The brush is one of the tools that can behave differently. Now, we didn't cover blending modes. That's going to be a longer video, but basically it's how does each new mark that I'm making behave with the layers underneath it, the marks underneath it. So if I were to change it, don't worry about why this is doing this, but if I were to change it, it's going to behave differently with the lines that already exist there. Okay, so lots of cool things we can do with just the existing tools and a plain old round brush. Okay, now because I'm working non-destructively, and hopefully remember to do it the whole time, I don't have to make a whole new document to keep playing. I'm just going to poke this guy in the eye and make a new layer so I can keep on playing here. So our second option is we can use brushes that someone else has customized, and you can buy these brushes online. There are probably a million brushes or more, that's not hyperbole, of brushes out there that you can buy, because Photoshop alone comes with hundreds and hundreds of brushes. So you can see they come in these little folders: general brushes, just plain old round brushes. Then we have dry media brushes, and then there's wet media brushes and custom brushes and all kinds of brushes and folders and all this kind of good stuff. And even some old legacy brushes that have been around for a really long time. Now these brushes, someone else has done the custom work for us and have designed, like if we look at this pastel rough texture, somebody has designed this brush to behave more like pastels. Okay, let's see if it really does. Let's see if it'll like blend a little bit. Maybe, sort of, kind of. Okay. So that's what they've done, is they've put a little more work into just not just making it bigger, smaller, opacity, but they've made some other changes. And we don't have to do that because somebody did it for us. So we can look through all of these different ones. Round fan with texture. Okay, ooh la la. Let's look at that with the darker ones so we can see it. Okay. All these brushes someone else has customized for us. So if you want a brush that behaves like an oil paint, we find that brush, probably under wet media. If you want a brush that behaves like a charcoal pencil, we find that brush. Okay, so again, what the brushes come with, tons and tons of them, all kinds of categories, including the old legacy brushes, special effects brushes that do things like make flowers. Okay. Now, you'll see this name pop up a lot in the custom brushes, this Kyle name here. And you're like, it's Kyle's Eraser and Kyle's Ultimate Inking and Kyle's Paint Box and Kyle Palooza and all these different things. That is from Kyle T. Webster, who is either an illustrator or graphic artist. I don't know. He's a brush genius. And he made hundreds and gazillions of Photoshop brushes, and finally Adobe was like, fine, can we just buy all your brushes? We'll name them all Kyle. And so they gave him big giant bags of gold in wheelbarrows, and now all these brushes, thank you to Kyle T. Webster, are here for us to use. So they're great because he has really done a lot of work in making something like Kyle's Real Oil. And it basically, if it's a Kyle brush and it says what it is, it's going to behave that way because most of his brushes are fantastic. Okay, so look, this even looks like it's like called smeary with oil. Okay, so that brush has been customized to behave like this medium. Look, it's even picking up what was supposedly pastel underneath. So you can look at the brushes that already come with Photoshop. Pastel Palooza's kind of fun. It sort of looks like pastels, okay, and does some nice blending. Yeah, you can find wet media brushes, special media brushes, all kinds of brushes that already exist or that people like Kyle have made for us. Okay, so that's really kind of our two main choices, is use the plain old round brush and customize it ourselves with these changes up here, or find a brush that already comes with Photoshop. And of course you can import lots of brushes. So that's step number one, okay? That's our first option. The second option I want to talk about is customizing these brushes that already exist. So let's start with just our plain round brush. So if we go back to our original brush we had a little while ago, just that plain old hard round brush, okay? And we need a new layer. Okay, and this brush currently does this, okay? Because it is 60 pixels, it is 100% hard, it is in normal blending mode, 100% opacity, no smoothing, okay? And this color, that's the mark that it makes. Keep in mind that this profile is actually dropping instances of this profile, okay, closer and closer together so it looks like a line, okay? So when I'm drawing a line, you can actually sort of see it when it lags a little bit, that it's actually just pooping out little instances of this circle, okay? And let's put that flow all the way up to 100 again. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's going to be important later that this profile is making this brush by a series of these individual boop, 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 boop. Okay, so big deal. Okay, and I'm not even using my pressure sensitivity, so it's not very cool at all, but we can make this pretty cool. We can bring up our brush presets and kind of get into the inner workings of the brush. Now, often the brush presets are right over here, and it looks like a brush. This brush settings, Okay, there's also brushes, which was our menu over here, but our brush settings, if you can't find it there, it's almost always the hotkey F5. And if you don't remember that, remember back in an earlier video, any tool set we don't know where it is, we can look under Window. There's brush setting. It reminds us it's F5. Okay, it's also that guy right there. So when this pops up, this is our brush settings. Okay, so this little round, boring old brush is not really using very much in the terms of setting other than it's got smoothing turned on. So what is all this doing? Well, let's take a look. If we start at the top at brush tip shape, we can see what we already saw over here. Our brush is oriented up and down and it is going left to right. We have some options like flip left, flip Y, but it's round, it doesn't matter. We can change our size here, which we know we can before, but this is cool, spacing. Spacing is how many of these little instances are going to poop out when we left click and drag. So if I increase the spacing, you'll see that it's dropping less instances as I left click and drag. Okay, here I was going click, 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 click. Here I am left clicking and dragging like I'm making a normal line, but my spacing has increased. So I can make my profiles overlap and then you get that kind of caterpillar looking line. Or I can make there be no space in which it appears like it's a solid line when really it's just these instances very close together. Okay, there we go. That's kind of cool. Let's keep going. So just understanding what that's doing. Let's increase the spacing a little bit so we can see what our brushes are doing. The next one down is shape dynamic, and not just clicking on it. You got to click on the word to get to the menu. Our first option is size jitter. Now you see lots of jitter, size jitter, angle jitter, roundness jitter, flip jitter. Jitter is to shake. Like if you have a lot of coffee and you're kind of shaky, you've had too much caffeine, you're jittery, you're sort of shaky. So what this means is whatever it is, size jitter. My brush right now is set to 60 pixels. If I turn this size jitter on to say 20%, okay, every mark that I make is allowed to shake, is allowed to jitter between 20% of that 60 pixel brush, right? So it could be 20% smaller, 20% bigger, okay? And when I left click and drag, it sort of makes this splatty looking one, because remember, it's dropping out these individual instances. So that's already pretty cool. That's a little more unique, bespoke. We're not going to go over every single tool here. We'd be here all day. Angle jitter isn't going to matter in a circle, because if we change the angle of a circle, it's still a circle. Okay, same thing with flip X and flip Y. We'll come back to these later, but if we flip it horizontally or vertically, it's still a circle. All right, let's move on to scattering. Scattering, I like to explain, is like, okay, I'm a kindergarten teacher and I'm walking across the street, okay, and I've got my scattering at 0. And as I walk across the street, all of my little kidlings must follow directly behind me. Stay on the sidewalk, kids, hold hands. They're walking directly behind me, following exactly my path. Now, as my kids get older and I'm teaching an older grade and I'm like, I'm going to increase the scattering, which means they have to go the same direction I am, but they've got a little leeway. Like, kids, just stay on the sidewalk. Okay. Now I'm not going, la, 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 la. I'm still drawing straight across, but these guys are allowed to scatter along the path. Okay. Then we get into middle school and these kids are just off the walls, right? And it's like, dude, just stay on this side of the road. Okay, every instance that poops out can show up anywhere 40% off of my path. So I'm still moving left to right, but it's like, dude, just stay on this side of the road. Okay, and then you either have toddlers or college students or whoever, people that really just do whatever the heck they want, increase that scattering, and like they're just moving left to right, but they're basically going anywhere they want to. Okay, you see this brush sometimes in things like daisies or leaves, so that with one little swoop across my screen, I can drop out all kinds of pretty instances of flowers rather than doing daisy, 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 daisy. Okay, that's kind of cool looking. All right, let's turn that off and keep moving. All right, so scatter is pretty cool. Let's turn that scatter back down to just a little bit. All right, texture does some cool things. The scale, the brightness and contrast, you can play with that. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Dual brush. is like alchemy. This is it's hard to tell exactly what's going to happen. Dual brush will allow me to take this brush and combine it with another brush and comes out to a third brush. Sometimes it's just like, I don't know, let's just see what happens. And you click on a brush and who knows, okay? Then it does something different. Like this has jittery edges now. You can try and dial that in, but often it's just sort of, like I said, it's just voodoo, it's magic. All right, here's my favorite, color dynamics. Let me turn my hue jitter off. When we are painting, oops, got my hue jitters on pretty far. Okay, when we are painting something when it's digital, it's going to be this, every pixel is going to be the same color. There's no variation. And in nature, in the real world, looking at things with our eyes, very few things are exactly one color. Look at your walls. They may be blue, but the blue right in front of you is not the same blue as the blue on the far wall or closer to the ceiling or closer to the floor. Colors vary a little bit, okay, because of light, or like our skin is not one color. We're not, eye robots, okay? So this color transfer, this color dynamics will allow us to have a hue jitter. Okay, so let's say I pick this red color right here, and this is my color. Lovely, okay? It's always going to be that color. If I raise the hue, remember hue is the name of a color. If I allow the color to jitter, I've got it up to 15%. Every time it makes a new instance, it's allowed to vary around the color wheel 15%, okay? It's allowed to be slightly different. So if I make a whole red wall like this, it's going to be visually more interesting. Now 15 is a lot. Okay, that's a lot of hue jitter. But I could do even more. Let's say I had that flower brush I was talking about earlier today. And I want every time my daisy scatters all over the screen to be a different color. I could increase that hue brush to 50%. And then it's allowed to go 50% around the color wheel, okay, which means it's never going to get to green because that's on the opposite side. But look at the variation I can get with a 50%. Oh, look, that's sort of green, yellowish green. If I go all the way to 100%, all bets are off. Every single dot's going to be different, okay, because it's basically saying, I don't care, be any color you want to. And I can adjust the saturation, brightness, all that good stuff. So I'm going to turn this back down to about 5%, so it's a little different. Our eye may not even notice the difference, but it is visually more, our brain will see it. So color dynamics is pretty awesome. These are a little more complex. We're probably not going to totally get into these, but feel free to play with these. What I would recommend, and I always tell you, to work non-destructively, and if you have a document, keep creating a new layer so that you don't have to make a brand new document each time you want to play with basically like a new piece of paper. So if you want to go back to Kyle and all his fabulousness, you can look at the brushes that he's made. Like let's go to Kyle's drawing brush, Happy HB. Okay, I'm going to make this brush bigger so you can see its profile. So that is the profile of the brush. So if you were to look at a pencil really close up, it wouldn't be perfectly round. It would have some inconsistencies, okay? And if I open my brush settings, I can see how Kyle made this brush, okay? I can look and see what did he do. Change the angle jitter, change the size jitter, okay? Played with the texture, worked with smoothing to make this brush work more like a pencil. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Even one of the more complicated brushes, I can go to one of the oil brushes and see how did he make this brush. Bonus chunky charcoal. Okay, that's a funny looking profile, but that's how this one works. And notice each time that I click, it looks like that brush is turning because he's got that rotational jitter on that we talked about. So in shape dynamics right here, brush tip shape. When we talked about flipping, you can flip right there. And in shape dynamics, you can jitter. So he's got his angle jitter at 100%, meaning every time I click, my brush can be angled any way it wants to. Unpredictable little speckly dots. You can also do flip X and flip Y jitter, which will jiggle back and forth and up and down. Okay, which is pretty neat. So I can make one cloud, and we're going to look at that when we look at how to make our custom brushes. One little design turn into all kinds of things by customizing it. Okay, so you can check out all the brushes that he has made or that come with Photoshop and see how are they made. So if we look at something like this oil brush, okay, you'll see that they changed. We've got texture and transfer and buildup and smoothing and all of the different parameters that went into making this brush. Okay, so whether we use a brand new plain old round brush or we find a brush that's pretty close to what we want. I want it to look like grass. I want it to look like whatever. Look and see if there's a brush. If it's close, if it's like, great, Kyle, I really like this maple brush. That's not a Kyle brush, but let's say I really like this maple brush, but I want them all to always be the same direction. I could turn the flips off, and now all my leaves will always be, they're going to turn an angle, but they're never going to be upside down. So I can adjust these fancy brushes. Okay, so it wasn't too hard, and I want you to get in there and play with this stuff and have fun with customizing the brushes that already exist. Play with this and understand how this works, because in the next video, we're going to talk about how to make your own custom brushes, your own custom profiles, and how they behave from scratch. All right, it's going to be lots of fun. Good luck with this, and I will see you in the next one when we make our own custom brushes. All right, be well.